The sun rose over the dusty village of Umuokoro like a golden promise. But in the heart of one small compound, Rosalyn stared uneasily, as if the light itself feared to touch her. Her laughter from last night's feast still clung to the walls, a memory now shadowed by Jeremy's eyes. Eyes that once whispered love and now weighed like chains around her neck.
We can't keep doing this. You have to listen to me now.
Let go of me!
You're not making any sense.
She had always believed marriage would be a shelter, a place where hearts could speak freely. Yet, here she was, trembling before a man who spoke only in riddles of anger and silence. Welcome to African Tales by Adogo, where the moon still listens and stories still breathe. The pot on the fire hissed as if mocking her, steam coiling like the ghost of streams she had thought herself worthy of. Each morning was a test, each word a battle. Yet she carried on with the quiet resilience of women who had learned to survive storms without asking the sky for mercy. In the marketplace that morning, the scent of roasted yam and fresh palm oil mingled with the vibrant calls of traders. Rosalyn moved among them like a shadow, her eyes scanning faces, always calculating, always hiding. She had learned to read the flicker of irritation in Jeremy's expression, the small smirk when he realized she had spent her own money on a new clothes, or the way he would subtly remind her of her place, as though her dreams were debts owed to him. And yet, deep in her chest, a small ember refused to die, a spark of defiance that whispered that life beyond this cage was possible. It was here, among the noise of everyday survival, that Rosalyn discovered the first threads of her own power, not in wealth, not in charm, but in the slow reclamation of the self that Jeremy sought to erase. Every evening, when the sky melted into hues of orange and indigo, Rosalyn would sit by the narrow window of their small compound and listen to the distant ululations of the women gathering firewood. The voices carried stories, old as the earth itself, of women who had faced tyrants, spirits and impossible odds, and yet had risen, her heart clenched with longing, for she had forgotten what it felt like to move freely, to laugh without caution, to love without fear. Jeremy's arrival from the city brought with it the weight of his disapproval, his footsteps loud, deliberate, an announcement of dominance. He spoke of debts, of misplaced priorities, of foolishness, as though she were nothing but a vessel for his whims. But Rosalyn had begun to notice the small fissures in his armor, the impatience in his hands, the way his eyes darted when she dared question him, the brief flicker of fear when she moved closer to the truth of her own strength. One day, in the quiet of the marketplace, she encountered an old trader named Eze, whose hair was silvered like moonlight and whose eyes held the calm certainty of someone who had seen the world bend and break. He sold palm wine and kola nuts, yet he spoke in parables that cut deeper than any sword. The river, he said, does not ask the rocks for permission to flow. It finds its own way, whether the stones resist or bow. Rosalyn held the kola nut in her hand and felt the words strike a chord in her chest. That night, she began to write, not letters, not complaints, but the beginnings of a plan. A restaurant, she thought, a place where she could create, feed and nurture life outside the shadow of Jeremy. Her fingers trembled, not with fear, but with the thrilling pulse of possibility. And in that tremble, she discovered something she had long thought lost: hope. Jeremy returned that evening with the air of a man who believed the world itself bent to his command. His voice carried sharp edges, slicing through the warm aroma of Rosalyn's cooking. Why did you spend on this feast? We cannot afford such foolishness. His hand struck the wooden table with a hollow thud, and for a moment, Rosalyn felt the old familiar fear coil in her stomach. Yet, something inside her resisted the familiar submission. She looked at him calmly, her hands steady, her eyes unwavering. "We'll live for more than just survival," she said quietly, each word deliberate. A stone placed against the wall of his dominance. Jeremy's laughter was cruel, but even as he mocked her, she sensed the tiniest crack in his certainty. That night, she wrote down everything: numbers, ideas, recipes, and tucked them into a small leather journal she had hidden under the floorboard. Each word was a seed, a rebellion, a step toward reclaiming a life that was hers alone. The following morning, she walked through the village as if she were a new person. Children ran past her, chasing a worn leather ball, their laughter spilling into the dusty street. She remembered the stories her grandmother told her of women who had crossed rivers barefoot and survived storms that tore villages apart. In the marketplace, she gathered ingredients and spoke with traders she had once avoided. Her words carried a quiet authority now, a reflection of the inner fire that Jeremy could not yet see. Eze, the old trader, watched her from his stall and nodded knowingly. "The river is patient," he said softly, "but it will not be denied." Rosalyn smiled for the first time in months that felt like years. Hope, she realized, was not a fragile thing. It was a force, as unstoppable as the tides themselves. That evening, Jeremy's temper flared again. He questioned every movement she made, every coin she spent, every breath she drew. Yet, Rosalyn no longer flinched. Instead, she observed him closely, noting the subtle signs of insecurity. The way his hands shook when he drank, the brief pause when he realized she had spoken truths he could not silence. She began to see him not as a master, but as a man tethered by his own weaknesses. A man whose power was only as strong as her fear allowed it to be. And in this revelation, Rosalyn found the courage to dream. Dream of a restaurant filled with laughter, music, and the aroma of spices that told stories of her people. A place where she would no longer be invisible, where she could feed not just the body, but the spirit. Rosalyn's mornings became rituals of quiet preparation. She moved through the compound like a shadow that had learned to dance in the light. Every grain of yam she peeled, every pot she stirred, carried the weight of intention. She began sketching menus on scraps of paper, imagining flavors that told the stories of her people. Bitter kola nuts mixed with honey, roasted goat meat infused with fragrant herbs, palm wine simmered with secret spices. These ideas, humble as they seemed, were acts of rebellion. Jeremy noticed, of course, but instead of anger, he feigned disinterest, hoping that by pretending not to see, he would make her doubt herself. But Rosalyn's resolve grew stronger in the silence of his dismissal. One afternoon, she encountered Robert in the village square. He was a man of quiet strength, his eyes holding the patience of one who had walked long paths and seen much of life's cruelty. Unlike Jeremy, he listened, and when Rosalyn spoke, even in fragments of ideas and fears, he offered not judgment, but encouragement. Even the tallest tree begins as a seed in the soil, he said, handing her a small bundle of wild herbs. Do not let anyone convince you that growth is shameful. For the first time, she felt a spark of camaraderie, a whisper that perhaps she was not alone. Robert became her subtle guide, never imposing, always present, teaching her how to negotiate with traders, reminding her to trust her instincts, and most importantly, helping her see that her dreams were worth the struggle. Meanwhile, Jeremy's manipulation deepened. He criticized her cooking, her spending, her very presence in the village. He invoked her family's sacrifices, whispered about the shame she might bring upon them, and made her feel like every breath was borrowed. Yet, Rosalyn began cataloging these abuses, not as fuel for anger, but as lessons in strategy. Each slight became a map of his weaknesses, each insult a clue to the power he believed he wielded. By night, She would retreat to her hidden journal, writing recipes and plans with meticulous care.